and welcome to CivilNet. My guest today at the studio is Jilozian. She's a research and data specialist at the Women's Support Center and the author of the first Femicide Report. Welcome to our studios, Ani.
Thanks for having me.
This sounds terrifying, Femicide Report, and it's done on behalf of the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women. And first of all, I wanted the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women. Who are the organizations involved, and what are some of the main things that you do?
The Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women is made up of 7 member organizations. We work primarily in advocacy, awareness raising, and a few of the organizations in the coalition directly work with victims and provide services.
And the Femicide Report, you talk about 30 cases, but you also point to a lot of problems. Could you just give us an overview of what the report is about?
So I should probably start by defining femicide. In the report, because the systems of oppression that women face in Armenia are specific and unique to them, we choose to use the word femicide rather than the more gender-neutral term domestic homicide. And for this reason, and we've also chosen only to focus on victims of domestic violence who were murdered by intimate partners or family members, though we recognize that there may be victims of femicide that fall outside of this because of the poor data collection systems and the dearth of research and information in Armenia. The best that we can do is report on the cases that we know of. So we report on the 30 known cases, though in the report we use the term at least because we expect that there are more cases that have not been registered or have been labeled as suicide or not labeled whatsoever. So the report goes into these 30 cases in particular. It looks at the lethality risk factors involved. It looks at the systems of impunity and injustice in Armenia, and it also gives a brief overview and description of the women's stories, the women themselves who are victims. And we chose to do this because we wanted to highlight and give voice to those women and also to give it that human element. So in the report, as you read it, and you can find it on the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women website, it'll go into the background, some of the statistics, women's stories, as well as the barriers that women face in terms of legal, institutional, and cultural barriers.
And as you look through the cases, a lot of data is missing, so you don't have access to such information, or how does that work?
Yeah, so in the report, there are a number of disclaimers that I've written in because, for instance, we don't have mortuary statistics, we don't have court records, we don't have systematic data collection. So the best that we can do is look at newspaper articles that were published. There is a website called Datalex that records some information on court processes when they exist. So, and also we have anecdotal evidence from families and from organizations that have worked with these victims' families. So with all of that, we sort of, I've combined whatever evidence that we do have and put it into the report. But like I said, there's a lot of information missing. There are likely a lot more cases that we can't report on. And there were other cases that were labeled as suicide or not labeled. And so we try to sort of give voice to these women and to show what we do have, but with the understanding that there's a lot missing.
And a lot of these cases the court cases are still ongoing, years on. What's the percentage where the court case hasn't been concluded yet, and on what grounds usually?
So as far as we know, of the 30 cases, there are at least 16 of them that are still ongoing, meaning that there was an initiation, there is a court proceeding that has begun, but there is as of yet no verdict. In 4 of the cases, the men were convicted of domestic homicide and were jailed, and with the average jail sentence for these 4 perpetrators was only 9 years. So when you really think about it, it's an absurd number. You can spend less than a decade of your life in prison for taking a human life. So, and that's if there is a verdict. So it's a very complicated, cumbersome system. it's been years in some cases that these court proceedings are ongoing. They find ways to legitimize the violence and to downplay the violence, so it takes years and years often to get verdicts.
But why is this mainly? Because we see this the same logic in domestic violence cases, whereas like the husbands get off with like minimal pay, just $300 for abusing your wife for 16 years. So what's at the base of this?
So that's a great question, and that goes back to the issue of not having legislation. So because we don't have a domestic violence law and we don't have mechanisms to support victims and to punish perpetrators, oftentimes, for instance, I work at the Women's Support Center, and we have cases of domestic violence. We recently had a case where the perpetrator got off after abusing his wife for 16 years on a charge of $300. So this impunity and injustice stems from the fact that we don't have adequate legislation to respond to these cases. And it also stems from the fact that we don't have a comprehensive and multi-sectoral response to this issue. So for instance, we don't have police that record cases properly. We don't have a system whereby the police work in conjunction with other agencies. The referral mechanisms are very weak, and these are things that we really need to work on in order to have a comprehensive response and stop the impunity.
Is there work being done to establish legislation that would actually be fair to women?
Mm-hmm. So the coalition formed 5 years ago. Prior to the formation of the coalition, there was the Women's Rights Center that first drafted the first domestic violence law. That law was rejected, the draft law was rejected. The coalition came together in 2010. They redrafted and resubmitted the law, and in 2013 it was again rejected. Now we're seeing that there's a lot of international pressure, and specifically from the EU, and so the Armenian government is now more likely and is being supported by the EU to pass legislation, so that by 2017 we will most likely have a domestic violence law. We will have the Istanbul Convention signed, which is a convention against gender-based violence, and we'll most likely have state-run shelters that have been opened in Yerevan and in the regions. But it's yet to be seen to what extent civil society will be working with the government. We hope that we can sort of leverage our position, and we hope that we can work alongside government agencies, given that we have the most experience in this field. And for instance, the Women's Support Center is one of the 2 organizations that runs a domestic violence shelter for women and children victims of domestic violence. So we're hoping that we'll be invited to take part in this very important process. So it's yet to be seen, what changes will take place, but we're hoping that it's going to be a positive trajectory.
Let's hope so. And what about the social background? How is it hindering or helping the situation? Because I was reading the report, and there are like 2,000 cases, I think, a year reported. This is a huge number, and yet you realize that, as you said, at least should come before every number you mentioned.
Yeah, so only the coalition itself and the 7 member organizations themselves have recorded roughly 2,000 cases in the past year of domestic violence. These are cases that have been referred to us. They've been calling our hotlines. And this is just the coalition, so there are many, many more cases. And what the problem is that a lot of these cases aren't being recorded, so they're not seen. But this is a huge problem. Domestic violence has gotten a lot more awareness in the past 5 years. We're seeing that more women are reaching out for support than ever before. And now we need to sort of step up and make sure that we can meet this greater demand for services.
Do you have cases where someone else reaches out to you on behalf of the woman who's being abused?
Yes, that does happen, although in order to access our services, the woman herself does need to contact us directly, but we do get referrals, and roughly 25 to 30% of the women who see us are referred by their relatives, their family, their friends. So it's the word of mouth is quite important in Armenia.
Yes, but then I just remember this case where a neighbor called the police because he heard that something was going on and the husband was beating his wife. And what she got in return was that the police told the husband who had made the call, and then the whole of the building, all the neighbors started abusing her, calling her a traitor and someone who shouldn't have been involved in this. In this respect, neighbors, families, how do they impact the abused? They keep them from reaching out for help, they encourage, it depends.
You know, there's a wide range of responses, and I listed some of the institutional and legal barriers to women speaking out, but as you mentioned, there's a number of social barriers. So women are often stigmatized, they're often shamed, they're told that they break up the Armenian family. Parents tell their daughters that they're not allowed back, that they should stay with their husbands and work things out. These women, even when they go to police, oftentimes the police say, go back to your husband and figure out your issues. So we're seeing here is there's not just a lack of there's not just impunity, right, and injustice at the legal level and the institutional level, but also, you know, in the social sector, families oftentimes are not aware, they don't understand the risk factors that are involved, you know, and there is this sort of shaming culture as well that sort of legitimizes the violence. So these are things that the coalition has worked on with awareness raising initiatives, through advocacy efforts, other organizations have as well, and we see that through these initiatives there has been more awareness raising. People are less likely, you know, to sort of legitimize the violence, but we do still see that this occurs, and especially in rural regions, especially where there has been less awareness raising carried out, this is still a big factor and a big barrier to women.
It's kind of terrifying because in the report you say that a lot of the time that the femicide actually happens during the period when the wife is trying to leave or separate.
Yeah.
And yet every time I think the society prolongs this period, therefore gives more room for violence, which can be fatal at the end.
Absolutely, and we know, you know, through working in this field, that it is the most, it's the most challenging time, and it's also the most risky time when a woman is trying to leave the perpetrator. And for that reason, when we work with victims at our center who come to us, we tell them there's safety planning. We tell them not to tell the perpetrator that they're planning on leaving, because that's the time where what often happens is he uses sort of these obsessive and possessive behaviors and tries to retain power and control. And that power and control, very unfortunately, leads in some cases even to death. So we have to be very careful about working and providing support services, making sure that the women know their rights and women know the best ways in which to leave an abusive situation.
All right, thank you, Ani, very much, and good luck with your work. I hope to hear good news of the legislation being passed soon.
Thank you so much. And for anyone who needs extra support and services, they can reach out to the Women's Support Center hotline.